2, 1.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Design Reinvention webinar series. I'm David Johnson, I'm the CEO of Delivering Age Communications, and today I'm going to be your moderator. Just a couple of quick things. The session is going to be recorded and it will be sent to everyone after the session. Please send your questions through the Q&A function below and we'll take as many of them as possible. So let's get going. So today we're not talking about COVID. I feel it's time to change the narrative and let's look to the future. So this series is going to be highlighting pioneers in our industry that are already far, far ahead. These are visionaries, the guiding lights who will inspire change and the future of travel across the world. So not long ago, the trend was getting out of the box. But here's a man I'm going to introduce you to that's been trying to get us back into the box, and in this case, behave, as he creates one of the world's most ambitious conservation projects in China, where the animals run wild and the people stay in the cages. So today I'm delighted to welcome you to one of the world's true design innovators, Bill Bensley.
Yay!
So Bill's gonna present his oh, you're very welcome. He's going to present his Human Zoo project. There's going to be a Q&A after that. And then he's going to be followed by another Bill Barnett. It's not going to be too confusing or anything. So no less notorious or controversial. Bill is the MD of C9 Hotelworks, and he's going to be talking about the new language of design for hotels. So Bill Bensley, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. This project is perhaps the most important thing we've ever done in the last 37 years of practicing architecture in Asia. And I say that because it has the ability to influence maybe up to 10 million people every year. And the real reason that I'm doing this, the real reason that all of this is happening is because I own a part of the Cardamom National Forest called Shinta Mani Wild. And every day we're under a huge pressure from poachers and from loggers and to be able to, who are poaching wildlife. And that wildlife ends up on the tables illegally in China and in Vietnam. And this project that we're doing here, which we call Worldwild, I think has the ability to influence a lot of people in the right direction. David, are you going to be asking questions or no?
I'm not. I'm going to be letting you run through it, Bill.
I see.
There's going to be questions after that.
Okay. So this plan that's actually, and David, you can see the plan that's here, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. Okay.
So this plan that's showing here is all of the land that we have for this project called Worldwild. And the idea, while the presses call it the human zoo, it's not really a human zoo at all, but it's rather a very large tract of land, something like 20,000 hectares, where, and it's right now it's agricultural use. But the idea is that we are going to take 95% of this land and let animals, non-predators, that's the key, animals run loose throughout the land. And then right throughout the perimeter, you can see on the lower left here, there's a white hotel here. David, can you point that out?
Yes, there we are, white hotel.
Yeah, that's not the one. That's the other one on the other side. That's the Waldorf Astoria. That's off-site, and then go straight down right there. This is our phase one. That's it exactly. So that's our phase one, and that's part of Asia Hotel, and that is a Hilton. So there'd be a Hilton here and a Conrad, and that's all part of Worldwild, but this occupies about 5% of the land only. The idea is to be able to take animals which are in the Chinese zoos now. And the Chinese zoos, I went to go and see almost every zoo in China. The Chinese zoos are not a pretty picture. There are sometimes the situation that the animals they are in are dire. They're horrible. So the idea was to bring in many animals, hoofed animals mostly, into this area and let them run free, and to try to emulate as much as possible their natural place where they would grow up. So how do I go to the next slide? Cup?
Jimmy?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a really cool, a cool cartoon map, I call it. And this is important because in the upper left-hand corner, this is where most of the animals will be, and that has very little human access to it. In the bottom right, the pink zone, that's an Australia zone. And then in the lower left or the lower part of it, that's an African animal zone. And to the left over here, that's an Asian zone. Now, we've done a lot of these drawings with cartoons because we know now that the Chinese population has, the Chinese people have no longer banned the one person family, the one child family. That was about 6 years ago. So we figure by the time that this all gets back on the line in about 4 years from now, there'll be a lot of families that have 2 kids. And they'll be in the age of 10, 12, something like that. But they'll all be very impressionable. So the idea is to have a train that runs right around the edge of the entire property, and a series of trains, so that you don't necessarily have to stay at a Hyatt or a Hilton or our Waldorf Astoria but you can be able to get on that train and you can stop at one of 7 whistle stops. And those whistle stops are going to be like a Chinese Broadway musical, if you will, because nobody looks at anything in the traditional museum anymore. But if you can make a presentation which appeals to the heart of the children, that will make an emotional impact of the young people of China, that perhaps what grandpa is doing is eating civets for dinner is not the right way forward. So, Cap, this right here is our drawing for the public areas of the African hotel. And it is as part of this is a vegetarian restaurant. And this has been picked up by the press numerous times. But inside of this is the lift core. Underneath there's a kitchen, etc. But it's a very unique image. So this is part of the African hotel. I have a lot more to show you about this. Cup. Again, Hilton is quite enamored with getting on board for this project. This is an interesting idea. This is on the inside of the human zoo, if you will, and it's an elevated swimming pool, so that in each one of these rectangles is an African-style cabana that you can occupy during the whole day. So you would swim up to these African cabanas. I've done probably 2,000 swimming pools in my life, and so this is very unique. But yeah, it's great in that just below all of this is animals can run through it. Elephants can walk underneath this, etc. So it's raised about 10 meters in the air. So it's really how to say, a first in the world. This right here, this is interesting too, in that this is the plan for the Hilton. And the unique part about this plan is that on the outside, on the upper portion of the plan, that's what we're looking at. We're looking to the outside and we're looking to the animals. And I give every single room in Worldwild, it has 2,400 rooms, but every single room has the ability to be able to sleep outside on a sleeping porch underneath the mosquito net, because I want everybody who comes here to be able to hear the animals all night long. You can come inside and sleep in the round normal bed, that's fine too. And off the back side of this is an enclosed aviary, so that while the guests can't touch or be even close to the birds, but they will be able to see the birds. Next, cup. A very interesting plan. And the buildings that we have for Africa all look as though that they've been growing out of the earth, as though they're growing out like a termite. This is our public area. Next. Okay, and then this is one of the suites. Remember, in Worldwild, we've got 3 different areas. We've got Asian rooms, we've got African rooms, and we also have Australian rooms. And this is one of the suites, which is in a zong, which is a Burmese style of building. Next. Okay, so this is the interior of the zong itself, but then just in front of where everything is looking to, we have a whistle stop, and part of that whistle stop is to be able to get lots of kids and lots of Chinese families actually underground, because I think that it's important that, how to say this, that everything that we do gives every scale of nature, from elephants all the way down to earthworms, every scale of nature and equal importance. And in no way should we ever have any of those animals perform anything, or to be dressed up, or to jump through hoops, or to do something that they wouldn't do naturally. So that is the impetus, and that's the main guiding focus, the main guiding idea behind everything that we're doing here. So it's not to exploit any animal, but it's to educate, and the importance of how human and Mother Nature can and should live in the future together, and not fight each other by eating each other. Okay? This is a section, sorry, this is a section through the main lobby, which is up on the upper level of this zong. So it's a really cool plan. We've spent almost 2 years organizing and drawing this. And then what's underneath here is being able to see the underwater world of a freshwater lake in Asia. So these is where these little white dots in here, this is where people from the train are walking through. And so again, the guests are in a very confined area where everyone from a fish to a frog to an earthworm to an elephant has a very larger area. Okay. Now, this is the elevations of the Waldorf Astoria. Very, very different ambiance again here. And this is telling the story not only about Australian animals, but also about the building of Australia as a relatively new country in the world. So we have represented on our plan is Australia in the 1700s, and the 1800s, and the 1900s. And this last one here on the very top is the 1900s, and it's what William Waldorf would have done had he gone to Australia. That's the idea. And this is a very fun interior of that hotel, where there's 2 single beds here, and there's 2 kangaroos fighting each other. So, while Wild World has a very serious connotations to it, it still represents a lot of Bensley wackiness and looniness. Okay, are we up for 15 minutes there, David?
Oh, you can keep going for a little bit if you don't. The questions are starting to roll in. Do you want to start taking some of them, or do you want to go a little bit longer?
Well, let's see the next or is that it? Is that the next slide?
3 more slides, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 more slide then. Okay, so this is part of the Australian what we call Fish River settlement, and this is explaining to guests the history of Australia, and Fish River is actually where they discovered gold. So that's part of the story here as well. So let's go ahead and start to take some questions, David.
Okay, great. The first one that's coming is how on earth did you manage to convince your clients about this project?
Well, actually, my clients are 5 brothers, and they're all very young. The eldest one is 37, and the youngest one is just in his late 20s, and they all are environmentalists.
Wow.
And they came to me 2 years ago. We've done a number of projects with them, but they came to me about 2 years ago with this particular project and said, we want to build a zoo, Mr. Bill. And I said, okay, great. I hate zoos. Now what, right? So I scratched my head and said, figured, how are we going to make this work? How are we going to make my dream of every single project that I do from now on to have a great purpose? That's my dream, is that I don't want to do hotels that don't have a purpose, don't have a meaning, don't teach somebody something or something about conservation. But I want to do everything from now on to have great meaning. So I thought, well, okay, let's take something zoo-like and let's give these 5 brothers a zoo, if you will. But let's turn it on its head and say that the majority of the land that we use, 95%, and that's why I went back to them and I said, I will do you guys a zoo. I'll do a zoo for you, but it's got to be this way. And so that there are no fences, there are no boundaries. They are only first shelf animal husbandry practices. We have only first shelf veterinary hospitals and so forth. And over the last 2 years, I've got on staff now a fantastic zoologist, and he works with us full time. And we're asking everybody in the world, what is your goal? If you could have all the money in the world, what would you do in order to make a good place for animals? And so that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to take all the best ideas in the world and put it into one place, and then have the Chinese people learn from that. Because certainly with COVID and the way that animals are transmitting to us all of the various viruses, we need to come to a realization very quickly about how we live with our wildlife.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Bill. I'm afraid there's a political question that's come in. I'm just going to throw it out there. With Mr. Trump calling COVID the China virus, is this an issue for international visitors, or is it all focused really on the China market? Bill Bensley?
Say it again, David, sorry.
With Mr. Trump calling
Uh-huh.
calling COVID the China virus. Is this an issue when it for international visitors, or is the project only focused on the domestic market?
For, right now, for me, if we do this right, and China has enough people in order to be able to support this project, in order to be able to support. So it's what we're concentrating on is a domestic market.
Yeah.
If Trump and those Americans that think that COVID is a China virus, they should stay at home.
Okay. Okay, good. Right. Well, there's some other questions.
They're
here.
not welcome.
In no particular order. So 95% of the land is roving animals from
Yes.
From the zoos of China. How do you keep the predators apart?
Well, that's the key. Is that in this zoo, in the sanctuary, the key is not to have any predators. And that's a first, because normal sanctuaries have predators, and that's where the problem lies. So so what are we going to do in order to make people interested? It's about talking about scale. It's about if you get the right person talking about the right thing, and you can make a snail look as interesting as a tiger jumping through a hoop. It's all about how it's presented. So we want to be able to present Mother Nature, but without the confines of the traditional zoo. Does that make sense, David?
Yeah, that's good. And just another one about safety that's coming. It's an awesome project, but what about the safety of people? Are people going to be safe there, Bill?
Absolutely, 100% safe. Sure, because there's always this boundary between animals, and because we want to protect the animals very much so that there'll be a train that runs through, and overnight trains. You can stay overnight and such. But the safety issue is very important. About 4 months ago, I presented this entire project to 45 of the highest officials on the Communist Party in Southern China. I had their attention for 4 hours. I had over 350 meters of drawings. I filled up a ballroom of drawings, and they were fascinated and gave us all, at the end of the meeting, they gave us a tacit approval of everything, hands down. So the Chinese government is totally behind this. And there was there's nothing that's unsafe about any of this.
Fantastic. There's a couple of other things that have come in on the vegetation and the environment. Is all the land native vegetation, or has any of it been planted?
As I said at the beginning, all of the land now and everything that we're taking is agricultural land. So that there are no trees except for a plantation of eucalyptus. That eucalyptus grove I'm keeping as a eucalyptus grove, but that's where we're going to house koalas.
Okay.
But everything else is going to be planted back to African natives and Asian natives and Australian natives.
Okay, that's great. Just a couple of other things. Cost of the project, when it's going to be completed, and exactly where is it?
It's in a place called Sanjiang. And if you know Hainan, the island of Hainan, and if you go right to the north of the island of Hainan, there's a city called Haikou. If you go from Haikou across to the mainland, that's where it is. Can you picture that?
Just about.
Okay. So it's in southern China in a place called Zhangjiang. The cost of the project, again, I said that it's about 2,400 rooms. Generally, a Bensley hotel runs about $1 million per key. So do the math. What was your other question?
Okay. Is there an closest international airport? I think we can work that one out already. Bill, let me ask you something else. There's about the hotel operators that's come in from Singapore. To what degree have the hotel operators had to adapt their products to the project?
You know, I've been doing this for a while, so I've been very flexible, and I can work with any international hotel company. So they haven't necessarily adapted and bent their rules at all. I've given sort of all of them exactly what they want and more. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's great. Can you describe some of the strategies that you've used to regarding building sustainably?
We should be able to be off grid. I've got a fairly large solar panels field.
Okay.
Got
Cool.
We've got retention ponds for all of the water that's coming in, because we know that during the summertime that we're going to be short on water. So it's we're trying to conserve that both above ground and underground. I think I showed you a couple of the plans of the rooms. And one of the key things is that in all of the projects that we do now is that we need light from two sides, so that you don't have to walk in the front door and turn on the light to the bathroom. During the day, there's absolutely no need to turn on any light anywhere. Also in the plan that I showed you, you see that there's a open in the front, open in the back. So if you open your, the weather in Zhangjiang is really nice most of the year. So you can open the window on the front, open in the back, and the window come through. All of the rooms are fanned. Mm-hmm. All of the rooms are fanned. So great. So a minimal amount of energy is going to be necessary in order for this to work.
Excellent. There's a couple more questions that have just come in, Bill, regarding habitat for the animals. How are you able to maintain the climate to provide the right habitat for different species?
Well, that's a very good question, and that we're not going to be importing polar bears. It's how to say, it's the answer is using common sense. We're not going to create special environments for things like penguins and such. What we're going to bring to the site are groups of animals, and we know that by way of experimentation, by way of research and such, we know that there are animals from Asia, from Africa, and from Australia that can cohabitate in this environment in Zhangjiang perfectly well and very happily. So it's only those animals that are going to occupy our zoo. There's 10 million species of animals. We might end up with 2,000. That's enough. That's enough. So I'm not trying to put a square peg in a round hole. I don't want to force, and that's the problem with a lot of the zoos, is that they try to force, because they think that if I don't have a lion in my zoo, that people won't come. If I don't have a penguin in a freezer, people won't come. That's not the case in the zoos of the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes great sense. What about there's a lot of questions about the animals, which is great. What about the food for the animals? Is the food green? Is it sustainable? I mean, what about feeding the animals?
Now I'm a farmer. I grew up on a farm in California, and the intention is is that we have our big lion, if you will, our big tiger in the park, if you will, are going to be large herds of hoofed animals. I said earlier, and that can be zebras and impala, etc. But the management is going to be like we manage in California, cattle or hoofed animals or goats and such, so that we will do so by paddock management, so that at any one particular time, the herds will be able to take up 208 hectares of land. And then we'll move those herds to another paddock, if you will. So,
yeah, please.
I'm sorry?
Sorry. Yeah, no, carry on, please. I interrupted you.
So like that, like you would manage, like you would manage any domestic animal. That's how we're thinking about managing the wild animals. And
right.
by also, that allows you then to plant and regrow an uninhabited paddock for them to come back. And so this is it's all very scientific, if you will.
No, that's right. I mean, there's been again, there's a lot of questions about this. I've got another one here, which is, other than large predator-free areas, can you speak to the plans and designs that you have to make the animals' spaces dynamic and unique? It's all about spaces for the animals.
Yes. I think that the spaces for animals unique. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think it's just a question of where the animals are, in the areas that they're roaming in. How can they be dynamic? Are they? I suppose they're just going to fit their natural habitat.
Well, remember that section that I showed you about how the guests from the train are going to come through a tunnel which is going through an Asian lake, for example. Right. So I think that we're going to rely heavily on understanding the scale of, from big herds, the scale of Mother Nature, from big herds to an earthworm, so that I want to rely on a section through a piece of earth showing how an earthworm lives, and make that as almost as important as an elephant sanctuary, for example. So it's about scale. I personally love reptiles, so I think that that's a good way of, on a small scale, to be able to make wonderful places for reptiles to live in very large areas that are unique. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one more for you, Bill, before we go over to the other Bill. Why did you, so you've divided the areas up into Asia, Africa, Australia. Is there any particular reason you chose those? And within those, I understand that there's, for Asia, you're looking at Tibet, Bhutan, Nepal. Is there any reason why you made these selections?
Well, it's not just about animal selections, okay? As an architect, I have also a very much a draw to places that have interesting architecture. I love the early architecture of Australia. I love the idea of adventure, and I thought, well, that would be a great place to start for a corner. And also because of the eucalyptus that were already there, they're existing. So I thought, well, gosh, that would be, a great place for what I call Camp Koala. Then I thought, if we did something that's Asian oriented, and I find the most beautiful architecture in Asia actually comes from the Himalayas. And I'm fascinated with that style of architecture. And two, by having a sanctuary of animal sanctuary, you open the door to any style of architecture you want. So it was my personal my personal wishes, my personal dreams in order to create something that's Tibet, that's Himalayan. And then if you're doing an animal park, an animal sanctuary, Africa is the obvious answer. And I love Africa. I've been working there for some time, and I understand lodges and such. So that was a no-brainer.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Bill. Bill Barnett, do you have a question for Bill Bensley? Bill on Bill?
I think I'll actually leave that for the very end of the session. So we'll come back to that. Let me think about that. Okay.
Okay, sure. Please go ahead. You're going to talk about you've got a few things on your mind regarding design language and vernacular.
Yeah. I think something when David and I was talking about the next person who comes up to me and says, "What's the new norm?" is going to get punched in the face. I'm tired of the narrative. At the end of the day, part of the attraction of hospitality is passion, and the passion of hospitality is excitement and creative forces. And something we forgot about over the past 2 months, 3 months is the creative process. And to me, I think something that we want to talk about with this design series, and Bill was great in joining us today, and something he said was designing with purpose. And purpose to me is, that resonates so much because, when we're looking at this design series, we're going to be, next week we're talking about health and wellness, and we're talking about organic farming, we're talking about bamboo architecture. It's out with the old and in with the new. Because at the end of the day, over the past decade or something, the current crisis is not just the new norm, it's an accelerator of a trend that's been coming for a long, long time. And I think that's what's important. What's happening today and where people are today, and when you look at a project like Bill's, this is something which should have happened as well, because we look at sustainability, we look at the ability to repurpose, to reposition, to renovate. And I think something from the crisis we're going to understand is that now there's financial need, and out of need comes greatness. There's the ability of great things to rise from this crisis as well. And for us to go back and say, for hotel owners, maybe it will slow down development, but also it could accelerate renovations. It could have a rethinking of projects now and saying, what's important? It's a matter of repurposing materials. The speeding frenzy of what we've gone over the past decade of, let's import this from Italy, let's import this from elsewhere, let's get this material as well. What we need to go back is, what are the noble materials? What are these simple things that we can do in terms of locally obtained materials? What's that look of the neighborhood as well in terms of how does that resonate with the design and the people and the culture? I think that's so important. Sometimes when I go back, I look at vernacular architecture, and to me, that's a simple need. There's a book called Learning from Las Vegas, which is in the 1970s, which talked about vernacular architecture, and it's really addressing human needs and human scale. And we can talk about the lip service we've seen in the past decade to social experiences, to experiential, to authentic, but at the end of the day, the human form. Because in reusing materials and repurposing design, there's beauty. And I think somehow we've lost touch with that beauty. And I think this is a time to restore that, certainly. I think that's quite important. In terms of its characters by the needs of construction methods, it's the craftsmanship. One thing I think for designers who are wohoing and saying, my business is finished, our design, for the next 2 or 3 years, we might as well go on holiday, that's nonsense. Because this gives an opportunity for arts and crafts to re-enter the process. We love what Bill does is creating the whole artisan prospect of a project and saying, we're touching other things. Great design goes beyond simply drafting something and handing somebody to build it. It goes about the materials. It goes about creating the signage, creating all those touches, the arts and crafts movement. And there's craftsmanship to great design. I think this is a time where everybody's had time to think, and we can go back and say, what is that process? Where are the values? And for hotel owners to say, yeah, maybe we don't simply, if we're going to redo a restaurant or reposition our rooms or something else, maybe we don't throw everything away. Maybe we repurpose things. Maybe we recreate it, but we have good materials here. We have good bones. And so that's really the search about what are those bones. I think something that we've had over the past 2 to 3 months with self-isolation, self-distancing is, what are those things we think and do not say? What is the future of that design? And if we're rethinking about hotel design, hard times create a platform for innovation and craft. To me, that's the messaging here, and I think that's important. A return to necessity and purpose, right? Is creating value, not only of the new, but value out of the old. And that's so important in terms of what Bill's doing in sustainability, what we see other designers in repurposing, right? to me, when we kind of close out this session, it's a tale of two crises. You can have a crisis and you can moan and say, I'm going to go lock myself in a room for 2 years and hope the clients come back. Or you can say, what is the new journey towards creative and economic partnerships? For a developer to come and say, I've only got this much money, but I've got good bones in the building. What can I do to reposition my product, right? To me, that's important. I think 2020 can still be the year of magical thinking. I think that's so important when we look at design, because to me, design, we can bemoan the crisis and everything else, but to me, this is one of the most exciting times of design because it's creating opportunity. I think that's what we want to explore today and with this entire series. We thank Bill certainly for coming and talking about his projects, but we want to continue this discussion. It's not, we've got to change the narrative about COVID-19 because we can understand the new norm, which is, I don't want to hear that word anymore, but how are we restoring design to arts and crafts? How are we restoring that whole process? We've got great creative minds out there, but it goes beyond AutoCAD. It goes beyond simply buying in materials from all over the world. It's representing that creative ability of these designers to go beyond and create a partnership with a client, because that's the age of architecture. That's the golden age of design, and that's where we want to go back to. So to me, that's my talk today, really about this is a time of magical thinking, whether you like it or not. Get on the boat and start doing great things for your clients and start a dialogue now. Don't just lock yourself away and worry what's going to happen in 2 years from now. You can't change it.
Here, Bill. Thank you. Good.
Okay. David?
Thanks, Bill. So owners, there's a new journey for owners out there. Whether they're going to repurpose their hotel or are they going to buy something and look at that differently? What is just quickly, just to wrap up that conversation? What is that process for them? What should they do? What should be their first steps?
That process is going back to a designer and going back and partnering with the designer, simply not going to a designer to design me something, partnering and having that discussion and understanding not only what their dreams and visions, but what they can do with what's available. That's why, later on in a few weeks, we'll be talking about farm to table and everything else, because, part of sustainability is not to eat ourselves in the process. It's really to go back and say, what is available here? What's available in a renovated building that can be reused as a starting point or rethought out? That has to make commercial sense too. It's also going to stretch designers to become business people too. They're part of that process. So they're the partners. So to me, that's an exciting time. So I think that's, it starts with a discussion. It starts with somebody, and people aren't going to stop renovating properties because you've got people now who say, I want to reposition my property. I want to recreate a space which doesn't work. I've got 5 restaurants. What am I going to do? So to me, it's an exciting time to be a designer because it's piece by piece, right?
Excellent. I'm going to say thank you very much, Bill Barnett. Great closing words. Thank you, Bill Bensley. It's been an absolute pleasure. Bill Bensley and crew. Really great to have you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks,
All the
Bill.
best, everyone. Thanks.
And we look forward to going to the zoo. Take care.
Great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.